I was not looking for a wife that day. Truth is, I was not looking for anything at all. Winter had its hands around my throat, and the ranch was thin on feed, thin on warmth, thin on laughter. The boy did not laugh much since his ma passed. I did not either. We got through the days like men cross a river in thaw. Careful, slow. Eyes on the far bank, because the water below is dark and cold and eager to take. Snow lay in the ruts outside Helena when I rode in. The wind had a knife in it, and it kept finding my cheek where the old scar runs from ear to jaw. I tied my horse and stepped down into the street, and the slush climbed my boots. I could smell whiskey from the saloon, smoke from a dozen stoves, a whisper of lard and coffee where the hotel kitchen breathed through a cracked window. That kind of town breath, a little hope, a lot of habit. Folks hung their lives on it every morning and hoped the rope held. I went to buy nails, wire, lamp oil, flour for the boy. I had a list on a torn scrap in my pocket, folded to a square and softened by my fingers. I kept touching it and reading it, as if supplies could warm a man. I walked past the livery, past the blacksmith, where the anvil rang like a bell, and the sound echoed in my chest. Then I heard another sound, laughter, but not the good kind. It was the kind that blows heat on old wounds. There was a knot of men under the overhang by the freight office. They had a woman standing among them. Not standing free, but made to stand, like a heifer staked in dust. She wore a burlap sack pulled down past her brow. The bottom had been cut away so she could breathe and see her feet, but not the world. She kept her hands close to her ribs, and her shoulders were tight, like she had learned the shape of making herself small. Wind tugged the sack. The frayed threads quivered against her jaw. A man with a fur collar and little eyes talked loud so he could hear himself above the rest. "No need for that," I said, more in my head than out loud. I did not plan to step closer. I did not plan to ask anything. But my boots moved the way a man moves toward a fire he did not light. The man with the collar saw me, and he smiled like a storekeeper does when he sees a full purse. "Morning, friend," he said. "Looking for a decent bargain?" "I do not buy what you sell," I said. He laughed and spread his arms. "You buy flour. You buy nails. You buy cows and calves and the rope to hold them. Why not buy a wife if needs be? Saves time, saves courting, saves disappointment when she turns ugly by lamplight." The men around him howled at that. I felt a small muscle jump in my cheek. I did not look at them. I looked at her boots. They were too small. Someone else's boots. Toes rubbed raw and wet from melted snow. I could not see her face, only a line of chin, pale and stubborn. "What is her name?" I said. He tilted his head like a magpie. "Folks call her whatever the buyer prefers." "What is her name?" I said again. He made a show of remembering. "Anna," he said at last. "Anna something, Eastern stock, plain, quiet, does not run her mouth. You might like that up in the hills. Cold nights, long silences. Woman like this will not drive a man mad, fill in the air." The man snorted. Anna did not say a word. She held herself and breathed. I could see the breath lift the sack and fall again. The wind carried a thread of soap from her, not fancy perfume. Soap and clean fabric and a hint of wood smoke that had settled in. It sat strange in the air among the tobacco and cheap liquor and the talk of men who never got enough of hearing themselves. "How much?" I said. The word was dry in my mouth. I hated it as soon as it fell. The man with the collar liked that question. He rubbed his hands together and named a price like he was calling a calf at spring brandings. It was steep for a cruelty, not steep for a life. I could pay it. I could not pay it without feeling the old ache of loss shift in my coat like a trapped bird against the ribs. I looked at her feet again, the wet toe of her left boot, the way the sack's frayed edge trembled when the wind cut across her. It was not the sight of suffering that moved me. I had seen plenty. It was the sight of a person being made less than a person. I know the difference between a hard life and a small life. Hard breaks you open. Small keeps you from ever growing to start with. I told him I would pay. The sound of my voice surprised me. It carried further than I meant it to, and the men grew quiet, then loud again, because a sale makes everyone brave and foolish at once. You want to look first, he said, grinning. Buyer's privilege. No, I said. She's not a horse. I will look when she wants me to. He did not like that, but he liked money more than he liked his own jokes. I counted out coin from a leather roll and saw the faces in the circle tilt, hungry as dogs. Some were offended that a man might buy without taking his gander. Some were itching for another laugh and were already shaping it with their teeth. I stepped close to her. She had not moved. I was careful with the space between us. My hands stayed where she could see them. I said her name and told her we were leaving. She nodded once. It was a small movement, but it felt like the first warm breath that fogs a window at dawn. I put my coat over her shoulders, not to hide her, to warm her. The sack stayed. The men called after us just to taste their own noise, and I did not answer. Her steps matched mine. Her breath kept its steady rise and fall. We reached the horse, and I helped her up as gentle as I could. She swung a leg over and settled. The horse snorted, then stood easy, like he knew how to carry this kind of weight. When we were clear of town and the road opened wide to the white fields and the black pines, I brought the horse down to a slow walk. Snow clicked under his shoes. The wind dropped, and all I could hear was leather and the rhythm of hooves and our breath coming and going like a prayer said without words. I said her name again. Anna. She turned her head toward the sound. I told her I had a ranch up in the mountains, a day's ride and then some. I told her there was soup waiting on the stove if the fire had held. I told her about my boy, Luke, 6 years old, quick with questions, slow with trust since his ma went to ground. I told her she would have a room and a lock on the door if she wanted it. I told her I would ride with her pace and we would stop when she needed. She listened. You can tell when someone is listening, even when you do not see their eyes. The air between you steadies. The sound of your own voice settles. You hear how words can hurt or help, and you choose from there. After a time, she said the first thing I heard from her all day. Thank you, she said. The voice was not weak. It was tired, and it was careful with itself, like someone carrying a cup brim full across a rough yard. We rode like that until the town became a smudge behind us, and the land rose and the light began to change. Winter light does that in the mountains. It finds your face and slides away, then finds it again. It keeps a man honest. It shows what is there without much favor. We reached a stand of fir where the wind eased. I pulled the horse to a stop. She sat straight, waiting. I moved to the ground and stood where she could see my hands. I told her now was her choice. She could keep the sack on and I would lead her to the cabin and she could take it off in her own time, behind a door that shut. Or she could take it off here, with the trees and the snow and the sky's witness, and let the wind carry off some of the stink those men had left on the morning. She was quiet, the kind of quiet that draws a man upright. Then she lifted her hands and found the twine at her nape. Her fingers moved slow at first. They quickened as the knot loosened. She pulled the sack up and off. It caught in her hair, then slid free. She drew one breath of open air, deep and long, and when she looked at me, I felt something shift in the world. Not a blow, not a crack, a settling. Like a door I had not known was open, finally closed behind me, and the cold stayed on the right side. Her face was not what those men had paid to laugh at. It was thin, yes. The winter had had its way with her, but her eyes were river stone under clear water, gray with a hint of blue, direct, alive. The kind of eyes that had watched storms and known they would pass. A small scar at her brow, cheekbones set high, a mouth that had learned to keep its own counsel, but had not forgotten how to soften. I did not say, "You are pretty." I did not say anything a man says when he wants to own what he looks at. I said only, "Welcome. I am Caleb Hart. My boy is Luke. If you come with us, you come free." I paid that man to end a bad thing, not begin one. She held my gaze a long count. Then she nodded. I saw a spark of heat rise in her cheeks, like the first lick of flame on cold kindling. She lowered her eyes just once, not in shame, but like a horse does when he decides he will trust the hand that holds the lead. She said her name again, quiet but clear. Anna. We started up the trail. The horse found the old tracks under the new snow. The trees closed around and the world hushed. I felt the day change shape. I felt the past, mine and hers walking behind at a distance, not gone, not forgiven, but kept where it could not reach forward and lay claim. I touched the scar on my jaw and left it alone. That mark is mine. The woman beside me was not. We rode on toward the mountain and what waited there. I did not know then how much of my life would be measured by that moment in the firs. A sack taken off, a name spoken, a road turned the right way. But I felt the truth of it in my bones, the way a man knows when his fence is true and his gate will hold. I felt it like warmth found again after too long in the wind. By the time the sun dropped behind the ridgeline, the cold had teeth again. The trail climbed steady, winding through spruce and rock, the horse sweating under the saddle though the air was freezing. I could see her breath curl in small clouds, steady and even. She rode straight, quiet, not fidgeting with the reins or asking how far. That kind of silence means endurance, not fear. I had seen both. We crossed the creek twice before the light began to fade for good. I pointed to a rise ahead where a line of cottonwood stood black against the sky. "We'd camp there," I said. "Cabin's too far to reach before dark." She nodded once. The horse turned up the slope, hooves crunching through crusted snow. When we reached the trees, I swung down and took her hand to steady her as she slid off. Her fingers were cold, but there was strength in them. I unsaddled the horse, shook out the blanket, and built a small fire in the hollow between two stones. The first match blew out, the second caught. The flame licked the shavings, then the twigs, then took to the bigger sticks. Soon it was burning steady, a low, gold circle against the white world. She crouched near it, hands open to the warmth. Her face in that light was softer, but the eyes stayed alert. "You hungry?" I asked. She hesitated, then said a little. I handed her a tin of beans, warmed on the edge of the fire. We ate without talk. The sound of spoons scraping metal and wind moving in the branches above. The horse shifted once, then settled. Night came down slow. When the cans were empty, I poured her a cup of coffee from the pot I kept wrapped in canvas. She held it close, sniffed, then took a sip. Her shoulders loosened. A man can watch that happen and feel a strange kind of peace, like watching frost melt off a fence post in the morning sun. "You came from the east," I said. She nodded. "Train, wagon, then on foot," she said. "I was told there'd be families waiting. They weren't. Just him." "Garrett," I said. She nodded again, her eyes on the fire. "He said if I wanted a roof before the snow, I should stand there till someone offered. And if no one did," she gave a small shrug, "then I'd still be standing." The wind shifted and blew sparks sideways. She pulled the coat tighter. I studied the lines of her face. Hard miles, but no bitterness. Just that careful watchfulness of someone who's been through too much to expect kindness twice. "You can sleep there," I said, pointing to the lee of the rocks. "Wind won't cut through much. And you? I'll take first watch. Wolves come down sometimes looking for easy meat." She glanced toward the dark trees, then back to me. "I trust you mean them, not me." I almost smiled. "Them," I said. She nodded once, lay down with her back to the fire, coat pulled to her chin. I watched the glow of it trace her cheek before she closed her eyes. The night settled deep. I fed the fire and listened. An owl called once from across the creek. The horse stamped and sighed. The mountains breathed around us, that slow, endless sound of snow shifting and trees creaking under weight. After an hour, she spoke again, voice low. "Why did you buy me?" I thought about lying, about saying something clean, easy to tuck away, but lies sit wrong in the chest. "Because I couldn't watch them do what they were doing," I said. "That's not the same as wanting me." "No," I said, "but I'm not the same man I was this morning either." She was quiet again, maybe weighing that. Then she said, "Thank you for not looking." I didn't answer. Some things sound truer left alone. By morning the fire was ash, and the air sharp enough to sting. She woke before me, already had water heating on the coals. The horse was saddled, gear packed neat. I'd never had anyone tend to camp like that without being told. She moved quick but quiet, like she didn't want to disturb the day. We rode out under a sky the color of steel. The trail narrowed, twisted through rock and pine. Snow sifted from the branches, landing in her hair. Once she looked up, brushed it away, and smiled, small and surprised, like she'd forgotten what that felt like. "You got people back east?" I asked. "Not anymore." "Sorry, don't be. They wouldn't be for me." We climbed until the land opened again, a wide basin with the mountains leaning close on all sides. My cabin sat on the far edge, smoke curling from the chimney. She saw it and straightened a little in the saddle. "That it?" she asked. "That's home," I said. "The boy inside if he minded the fire." She nodded, and something like caution flickered across her face. I understood. A new place, a child who wasn't hers, a man she'd known for one night. As we neared the gate, the door creaked open. Luke stepped out, bundled in a coat too big. The sleeves rolled to his wrists. His hair was a tangle, his eyes wide. "That him?" She whispered, "That's my boy." He watched us ride up, one hand on the door frame. When we stopped, he said, "Pa, who's she?" I swung down. "This is Miss Anna. She's staying for a time." Luke looked at her, serious as a preacher. "You got a gun?" She blinked, then shook her head. "Good," he said. "Pa says only fools draw first." She smiled then, a small one, but it reached her eyes. I helped her down, and Luke stared a moment longer, and then ducked inside. The cabin smelled of pine, smoke, and bread. The fire had held through the night. I set her pack by the door and told her she could take the bed for now. I bunked by the stove. She ran her fingers over the rough log walls, the shelf with the lantern, the worn Bible beside it. "You built this yourself," she said. "With help from a storm and a good mule," I said. She turned, half smiling. "I'll try not to break it. You won't." Luke came back with 3 cups, mismatched tin. He set them careful on the table, his way of saying welcome without using the word. She thanked him. He nodded and sat. That night, after the boy was asleep, I stood outside a while, listening to the wind move through the trees. Her shadow crossed the window once, slow, then stilled. I thought of the sack she'd worn, of the way it had fallen from her shoulders into the snow. Some things you carry longer than they weigh. I hoped this place might be lighter. Inside, the fire crackled. Luke turned in his sleep and mumbled something soft. I looked at them both and felt that small ache again, the one that meant maybe there was still life left in a heart gone quiet too long. That was the first night she slept under my roof. The first night I didn't feel the house was only timber and nails. It had someone breathing hope back into it, one steady breath at a time. Morning came slow, blue and brittle. I woke before the light touched the peaks. The air had that taste of iron that comes before a hard freeze. Inside, the fire had gone low, just red eyes under ash. I stirred it, added a stick, and the flame came back like a held breath. Anna was already up, kneeling by the stove, feeding it smaller pieces from a box she'd split and stacked herself. Luke sat on the floor with a tin horse, pushing it through invisible dust. She looked up when I moved. "Morning," she said. "Morning," I answered. "You sleep all right?" "Better than most nights." That was enough to make the day start easy. I poured water from the kettle, steam rising slow. Outside, the wind was still, half asleep, but the mountains were awake, the kind of quiet that hums with their watching. The smell of coffee filled the room. I set a cup for her, another for me, and one for Luke, with a drop of milk to cool it. He grinned when the cup touched his hands. After breakfast, I went to the corral. The mare needed brushing, and the fence had a board come loose. Anna came out a few minutes later, wrapped in her shawl, boots crunching the frost. "You don't have to work today," I told her. "I don't know how not to," she said. She took the brush when I handed it, worked steady, long strokes down the mare's flank. The animal snorted, then settled. There's something about the way a gentle hand moves that no man can teach. I watched for a while, then turned to hammer the board back in place. You said your boy's mother," she started, then stopped. "She passed when he was small," I said. "I'm sorry." He remembers her more in smell than sight. Bread baking, soap on the line. Anna nodded. "That's how I remember my mother, too." We didn't talk much after that. The morning built itself out of small sounds. The creak of the gate, the thud of hooves, the hammer finding the nail true. By noon, the wind picked up, sweeping the snow in small whirls across the yard. I saw her stop, look toward the ridge where the trail disappeared. Her eyes went far. "You thinking about the road?" I asked. "I'm thinking it goes both ways." "It does," I said. "You can take it when you choose." She looked at me then, long and steady, as if weighing whether those words would hold come spring. That evening, we sat by the fire after supper. Luke had fallen asleep with his head on my leg. The flames made slow patterns on the walls. Anna sat in the chair opposite, mending one of Luke's shirts. The needle flashed each time it caught the light. I told her about the first winter I built this place, how the roof leaked, how the snow came in sideways and I'd wake with a drift across my blanket. She listened, quiet, hands working. When I paused, she said, "You ever think of leaving?" "Once, but the mountains got their hold." She smiled, the kind that flickers more in the eyes than the mouth. "The mountains keep more than they give." "That's true," I said, "but what they give lasts." The fire cracked. Outside, the wind shifted again, sending a low moan down the chimney. She set the mending aside and leaned closer to the warmth. "When you cut that sack from me," she said, "I thought you'd look and turn away." "I almost did. Why didn't you?" "Because you looked back." Her hand stilled in her lap. "That's all?" "That's enough." She nodded, as if that answer belonged to something older than either of us. Days went on like that, the rhythm of work and weather. She cooked simple, clean meals, helped Luke with letters in the evening, the boy tracing shapes with his finger on the table. She sang once, not knowing I heard, soft, a tune from somewhere back east. The sound of it filled the cabin like light through a cracked door. One morning, I rode down to the valley for supplies. When I came back, I found Luke outside, bundled thick, hammering two sticks together. Anna stood by, showing him how to fit the crosspiece straight. She looked up as I came through the gate. "We're making a sled," she said. Luke grinned. "It's gonna fly, maybe after lunch," I said. Anna laughed, and the sound startled the mare by the trough. I hadn't heard that sound in this yard since Clara was alive. It hit something deep and gentle inside me. That night, after Luke was down, she stayed by the fire again, mending one of my shirts this time. Her fingers moved careful over the tear near the cuff. "You don't have to," I said. She didn't look up. "I know." The clock ticked, the wind outside sifting snow against the wall. "You think the boy likes me?" she asked. "He asked me today if you'd stay." "That's something." Her hand paused over the fabric. "What did you tell him?" "I said you'd stay as long as you wanted, and if I leave, then he'll remember you kindly." She breathed out slow, eyes on the needle. The silence after was soft. Later, when I lay in my bunk, I listened to the house breathe, the pop of settling timbers, the faint hum of wind against chinked logs. I could hear her steps above, the creak of a floorboard, then stillness. That sound did something to me. Not the wanting of a man, but the simple knowledge that another soul was walking the same floor, under the same roof. In the days that followed, she fit herself to the place as if it had been waiting. The rooms took on a different quiet, not empty, but full of listening. Luke followed her everywhere. She taught him to read small words from an old primer she found in her pack. He'd point and stumble through the letters, and she'd nod, smiling when he got it right. When the first snowstorm hit, we were ready. Firewood stacked to the rafters, shelves full, The wind howled like wolves that night, real ones answering somewhere up in the timber. Luke crawled into my bunk half asleep, eyes wide. "They won't come in," he said. "Not with the fire burning," I told him. Anna stirred from her room, brought another blanket, tucked it around him without a word. Her hand brushed his hair. The boy sighed, drifted off. She looked at me across the dark, only the orange glow of the coals between us. "You've done well with him," she whispered. "Tried to. He's got your quiet. He's got his mother's light." She nodded, eyes soft. Then she turned and went back to her room, the door closing with a sound like breath leaving a wound. I lay there a long while after, watching the fire die down, thinking of all the roads that led two lost souls to the same roof. Out there, the snow kept falling. Inside, the warmth held steady, and for the first time in a long time, the dark didn't feel empty. The storm stayed 3 days. Wind tore down from the peaks, shoved against the door like a thing alive. The world outside turned to white noise. No horizon, no sky, just the hiss of snow and the groan of timbers fighting to hold. Inside we moved slow and quiet, keeping the fire fed, melting snow for water, counting out the food we'd put by. Luke made a fort out of blankets and chairs. Anna helped him, her hair coming loose as she crawled under the quilts. He'd shout from inside, calling it a castle, then a ship, then a fort again. Her laughter followed, soft, real, of the kind that warms a room better than flame. When she caught me watching, she smiled through the stray strands of hair. "He's a good boy," she said. "He is," I said. "Takes after his mother's kindness more than my sense. You sell yourself short. Not selling, just counting true." She looked around at the walls, the shelves, the wood stacked neat beside the stove. "You built all this from that truth," she said. "Maybe that's worth more than sense." I didn't answer. Sometimes a man doesn't need to win a word. He just lets it settle where it lands. That night, the wind hit harder. It moaned down the chimney like a voice calling for something lost. I went outside once to clear the drift from the roof edge. The snow came over my boots, near to the knee. When I turned back, I saw her standing at the window, lamplight behind her. She raised her hand, small and quick, a silent check to see I was there. I nodded, and the gesture felt like a thread stretched between us, thin but strong. Inside again, I stripped off the wet coat. Luke was curled near the hearth, half asleep. Anna was kneeling by him, adding a stick to the fire. I could smell the faint soap she used, mixed with smoke and pine. "You'll catch your death," she said. "I've met worse." She looked up, met my eyes, and for a heartbeat there was no wind, no storm, no noise, just the space between us holding steady. Then she looked away, stirred the embers, and the moment passed. We spent the next day telling stories to keep the boy from climbing the walls. She told one from her childhood about a dog that followed her to church and how it barked through the sermon until the preacher gave it a biscuit to keep quiet. Luke laughed so hard he spilled his milk. When it was my turn, I told about the first horse I ever broke. Half wild, all fire. Took me a week to earn its trust. Luke asked if I was scared. I said yes. Every man's scared when he meets something that can break him. That's what makes it worth doing. That night, after Luke fell asleep, Anna stayed by the fire. I was whittling a piece of cedar into a spoon, more for the sound of the knife than the tool itself. She watched the shavings curl and drop. "You miss her," she said, "every day. She was the kind who made silence feel full. "That's rare now?" she asked. Now the silence feels different," she said, her mending aside. "Different how?" "Like it's waiting for something, not mourning it." She nodded slowly. "That's a kind silence to have." The storm broke the next morning. The sky cleared to a sharp blue that almost hurt to look at. We stepped outside into a world remade. Snow lay heavy on the pines, glittering in sunlight. Luke ran circles in it, shouting, throwing handfuls that burst into powder before they hit the ground. Anna laughed, chasing him, her boots sinking deep. Her cheeks were flushed, her breath clouds of white. I stood by the fence watching them, something tight in my chest, loosening by degrees. When she slipped on the ice and fell back laughing, Luke flung himself into the snow beside her. The sound of them together carried across the yard like a hymn to simple things. She caught my eye and called out, "Come join us, Cowboy." I shook my head. "Someone's got to keep the fire burning." "Then keep it burning bright," she said, and threw a snowball that hit my shoulder. I could have pretended not to see it coming, but I let the smile take me. I scooped one up and lobbed it back, soft enough to miss, but close enough to make her duck. Luke whooped. Later, when the day faded and the snow turned blue under the dusk, we sat on the porch steps, drying boots by the door. She looked at the ridge where the sunset burned low. "You ever wonder," she said, "if maybe the Lord puts folks together not to fix what's broke, but to keep it from breaking worse?" "I reckon that's the same thing," just kinder said. She looked at me then, eyes steady. "You got a gentle way of being honest, Caleb Hart. Don't know about gentle, just learned not to waste words." Luke called from inside, asking if we were eating. She smiled, stood, brushed snow from her skirt. As she passed me, her sleeve brushed my hand, light, unplanned, but it stayed in the air between us even after she was gone inside. That night, I sat by the dime fire, listening to her hum in the next room. The tune was low, near to a whisper, something from a life before this one. I thought of that sack she'd worn, how it hid her from a world too cruel to look right. And now she sang. Here, where no one could buy or shame her. It struck me then how healing doesn't come all at once. It comes like thaw, quiet, slow, working under the snow where no one can see it yet. I felt it moving in this house, in her, in me. Before I turned in, I stepped outside again. The stars were fierce and close. The snow held their light like glass. I breathed deep, the air sharp and clean, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone in it. Spring came shy that year. The snow didn't melt so much as pull back a little each day, leaving dark seams of earth showing through. Streams started whispering under the ice, and the air smelled of wet pine and thawed soil. You could hear the roof drip after noon, the slow rhythm of winter letting go. Anna took to opening the door each morning, letting the sun reach into the cabin. She'd stand there a while, eyes closed, face tilted up, like she was letting the light learn her name again. Luke would race outside to see how far the snow had shrunk overnight. His laughter ran out across the field, clear as water. I'd watch them both and feel something in my chest uncoil. The house sounded different now. Her hum in the mornings, the scrape of her broom, the boys' chatter. Even the silence between their voices had a pulse to it. One afternoon, I rode down the ridge to check the traps. She came with me, said she wanted to see the melt. The path was slick, mud under crusted snow. She walked careful, skirts hitched a little, boots leaving clean prints behind mine. "You ever been in country like this before?" I asked. "Not this wild," she said. "It feels like the earth breathes slower here." "That's because it remembers longer," I said. "Out here, everything keeps what it's seen." She nodded, quiet again. The wind came soft through the pines, smelling of resin and damp moss. When we reached the creek, the ice had cracked open in long black lines. The water below ran fast and cold. She crouched, touched the surface with her fingertips, then flinched back from the chill. "Still alive," she said, smiling. "Always was," I said, "just hidden for a spell." On the ride back, she told me about her father, how he'd been a carpenter, how he used to hum while he worked. She said she still heard it when she sanded wood or mended something that needed patience. He used to say, "Don't rush a fix. Wood remembers hurry," she said. "Sounds like a man who knew more than wood." Maybe. He wasn't kind all the time, but he had hands that made things stay together. She looked down then, tracing the horse's mane with her glove. "I think that's what I've been trying to find again. Something that stays together." The trail bent, and we came up on the cabin. Smoke from the chimney, steady and gray. Luke's small figure by the gate waiting. She waved and he ran out to meet us, boots splashing through meltwater. Later, while she cooked, Luke sat near the table carving something from a bit of pine I'd given him. The smell of stew filled the room. He looked up once and said, "Pa, can I call her Ma?" The question caught me off guard. Anna froze, ladle midair. I looked at her. She met my eyes, waiting. "If she says it's all right," I said. Luke turned to her. "You mind?" Her voice was soft, careful. "You can, if it feels right to you." He smiled, big and sure. "It does." She turned back to the pot, but I saw her shoulders tremble once. Not crying, just something loosening inside her. I felt it too. After supper, I stepped outside. The sky was pale blue still, the kind that comes before sunset. I leaned on the porch rail, listened to the thaw drip from the eaves. She came out behind me, wiped her hands on her apron, stood beside me. "He's a good boy," she said. "You make him better," I said. Her eyes softened. "You make it sound easy." "Nothing about it's easy," I said. "But some things are worth the trying." The wind carried the smell of wet cedar and wood smoke. She looked out across the field where the snow still lay in the hollows. The setting sun caught in her hair, turned it copper at the edges. "You ever think about what comes next?" she asked. "Every day. And I reckon you can't plan a spring too far ahead till you see what the frost leaves alive." She smiled at that. "You always talk like that, like what?" "Like you're carving truth out of wood, one word at a time." I shrugged. "Some words deserve a sharp knife." She laughed, soft, then quieted. "I'm glad you found me, Caleb, even if it wasn't for love at first." "It wasn't for pity either," I said. "I know." She looked down at her hands, then at me. "What do you call it then?" "Start," I said. Next day, we went into Helena. Supplies mostly, nails, seed, a new coat for Luke. Folks watched us when we walked down the street. Some recognized her. I could tell by the way they looked twice and whispered low. She stood straight anyway, chin high, eyes clear. At the store, the man behind the counter froze a second too long when he saw her, then looked at me. I met his stare till he looked down. Anna kept her voice calm, asked for what she needed, counted the coins herself. When we stepped back into the street, She let out a breath she'd been holding. "You handled yourself fine," I said. She gave a small laugh. "Didn't throw a single punch, if that's what you mean." "That's exactly what I mean." We loaded the wagon and started home. The sun was low, turning the snow gold. She leaned back against the seat, hair loose under her scarf. For a long while, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "You know what I realized today?" "What's that?" "They can only shame you if you stay standing where they left you." "That's true," I said. She looked at me, a faint smile playing at the corner of her mouth. "Guess I moved on." "You did," I said, "and I'm glad I was looking that way when you did." When we reached the cabin, Luke ran out again, shouting about the sled he'd built. She laughed, jumped down to see it. I watched her kneel beside him, helping tie the rope to the front. The last of the sunlight caught the snow around them, glowing like a promise. Inside later, I wrote in the ledger, "Feed bought, seeds ordered, small things that make up a life." When I closed the book, I looked around the room. Her shawl hung by the door. Luke's boots lay sideways near the hearth. The kettle sang low. It felt like a home, not a hiding place. Before sleep, I sat by the window. The moon rose over the ridge, pale and full. I thought about what she'd said, that some things stay together because someone keeps trying. Maybe that's all we were doing, holding the pieces steady while they learned how to fit. The night was quiet, not empty, just waiting, like spring itself. By April, the valley had turned from white to brown and then to green. Grass pushed through in thin blades first, then thicker, and the air began to smell of life again. You could hear the creek running full now, the sound steady and strong. Each morning the sun climbed a little higher, and the days stretched long enough to make work worth doing. We set to mending fences and clearing branches that winter had dropped. Anna worked beside me, sleeves rolled, hair tied back with a strip of cloth. She could swing an axe true, light but steady, letting the tool do the work. Luke followed us, carrying smaller branches to the pile. The three of us moved together without much talk, the kind of rhythm that comes when everyone knows what needs doing and trusts the others to do it. One evening after chores, I found her sitting by the creek with her shoes off, toes in the cold water. The sky was turning violet, and the first stars were out. She looked up as I came down the slope. "You ever notice," she said, "how quiet water sounds after a long winter?" "It's not quiet," I said. "You just forgot the sound." She smiled. "Maybe." I sat beside her, the grass still cool under my boots. The creek caught the last light, turned it silver. She tilted her head toward me. "Do you ever miss the noise?" "What noise?" "Town. People." "No," I said. "Noise makes you forget what you're carrying. Silence makes you remember." She thought about that, then said, "I used to be afraid of remembering. And now I think it's the only way to keep from repeating." She drew her knees up, hugged them. I could see the faint scar near her brow catch the fading light. "I thought I'd lost myself, Caleb. That morning in Helena, I wasn't sure there was anything left under that sack worth saving. I didn't save you, Anna. You did that yourself." She shook her head, smiling just a little. "You showed me what it looked like. The water kept moving. The sky darkened until only the stars and the fire from the cabin windows lit the world. We sat there until Luke's voice carried down the hill calling us to supper. After we ate, I walked out to the barn to check the horses. Anna came too, holding the lantern, The light made her face glow warm. Dust floated through it, small and golden. You ever think, she said, how fast trust comes once it finally starts? Faster than a storm rolling down a pass, I said. She laughed quietly. That's a fine way to put it. Luke's voice came from the door. Pa, are we going to town tomorrow? Might have to, I said. Need salt and flour. Can I come? We'll see, depends on the weather, he nodded, already half asleep on his feet. Anna led him back inside, hand on his shoulder. I stayed in the barn a while longer, listening to the horses shift and breathe. The smell of hay and leather filled the dark. I thought about her words, how trust comes fast once it starts, and felt the truth of it settle in me. The next day dawned bright. We loaded the wagon, left Luke with the neighbor down the ridge, and rode to Helena. The road was clear, mud in places, but no snow left in the shadows. She sat beside me, scarf tied under her chin, eyes bright against the wind. When we reached town, people looked again, but not the same as before. Some nodded, some turned away. She didn't flinch. Inside the store, the clerk spoke to her like any other customer. She paid for flour, coffee, soap, and a length of blue cloth. That for you? I asked as we loaded the wagon. For curtains, she said. Windows look too bare. Curtains, I said, tasting the word. Guess it's about time. She laughed. You sound surprised. Never had much need for them. Then you never had much light to soften. On the way home, clouds piled up over the mountains, dark and wide. We rode faster, hoping to beat the rain, but the storm caught us halfway, wind pushing hard, rain coming in sheets. I pulled the horse off the road into a stand of fir. The smell of wet needles filled the air. We'll wait it out, I said. She nodded, water streaming from her hair. I threw the blanket from the wagon over her shoulders. She sat close, under the branches. Lightning flashed, light in her face for a breath. Her eyes were steady, not afraid. You always this calm in a storm? I asked. Only when I know who's holding the reins. I chuckled. Then we'll be fine. When the rain eased, we rode on, soaked but alive. The cabin came into view just as the last light faded. Luke's lantern shone in the window, steady as a star. Inside, he met us with a towel and a grin. You're wet, he said. That's sharp, I told him. He laughed and went to stir the fire. Anna disappeared into her room, came back with a dry shirt for me. She set it by the stove, handed me a cup of coffee. Her fingers brushed mine, just once, but enough. The room smelled of wet wool and smoke. She hung the blue cloth by the window. When the firelight caught it, the color deepened, soft and warm. That looks right, I said. It looks like home, she said. We ate simple that night, beans and bread, but it tasted like more. The storm moved off east, and thunder faded to a memory. Luke slept early. The dog curled beside him. Anna sat sewing by the fire, her hair still damp. You know, she said, I never thought I'd call the place mine again. You can, I said. You mean this house? I mean whatever you choose. She looked up, eyes catching the firelight. You always give answers that sound like prayers. Just practice, I said. For what? For meaning them. She smiled then, slow and sure, and the room seemed to breathe with us. The rain ticked on the roof, softer now. I leaned back, listened to the sound, and thought that maybe, just maybe, the worst of the winter had passed, for all of us. The weeks that followed felt like the land itself had started to forgive. Grass grew thick where snowdrifts once stood. The creek ran high, singing through the rocks. Birds came back in pairs, bold and busy. Inside the cabin, the blue curtain sheet hung, moved with every breeze, like they were breathing for the house. Anna planted a small garden out back, rows straight as prayer lines, peas, beans, and a little patch of flowers Luke had begged for. He said they were for his ma, and Anna smiled, but didn't correct him. Sometimes I'd watch her kneel in the dirt, fingers dark with soil, the sunlight on her hair. There was something sacred in the way she touched the earth, gentle but sure. One morning, Luke found a robin's nest in the tree near the barn. He ran inside shouting for her. She came out, wiped her hands on her apron, and followed him. The boy pointed to the nest, eyes wide. She lifted him up so he could see inside. 4 blue eggs, still and perfect. See that? She said, even the smallest things start over when they're ready. He nodded, serious as a man. Will they come back every year? If the tree holds, she said. Luke looked at me, then back at her. We'll keep it safe. The way she looked at him then, it was soft but certain. That kind of look can raise a boy better than sermons ever could. As the days stretched long, I found myself standing in doorways more often, watching her and Luke move through the light. I'd forget the tools in my hands, forget the chores waiting. Sometimes she'd catch me staring. She never said a word about it, just smiled that quiet smile, the one that told me she knew and didn't mind. One afternoon, she asked if we could ride to the meadow above the ridge. I saddled the horse and helped her up behind me. The trail wound through tall grass, soft and green now, waving in the wind like the sea. When we reached the top, the valley spread below, gold and wide. She took a deep breath. I didn't think I'd ever see something like this again, she said. It's been here waiting, I told her. She laughed. You make it sound like the world was just holding its breath for me. Maybe it was. She was quiet then, and after a while she said, Caleb, what do you want for this life of yours? I thought about it. For the boy to grow honest, I said. For the land to feed us. For the nights to stay peaceful. And for you, for peace to mean something. She nodded slowly. That's a good thing to want. What about you? To not be afraid of wanting again, she said. The wind moved through the grass, carrying her words away, but they stayed with me. On the way back, we stopped by the creek to water the horse. She reached down, trailed her fingers through the current. The sun caught the drops on her skin, turning them to sparks. I wanted to reach for her hand, but I didn't. Not yet. That night, after Luke was asleep, we sat by the fire. She was sewing again, patching one of my shirts. The light played over her face, softening the hard lines the world had carved there. You ever think, she said, about the way we start over without noticing? One day you wake up and realize the hurt's quieter than it used to be. Yeah, I said. Then you get scared it might come back louder. She smiled, half sad. Maybe it does, but maybe that's just life asking if you're still paying attention. We sat quiet for a while. The clock ticked, steady as a heartbeat. I said, Anna, there's something I need to ask. She looked up, waiting. You've been here near half a year now. I bought that paper from Garrett, the one that said you belonged to him. I tore it up, but if you want, I'll write your freedom clean on my own letter. You can go wherever you choose. She put her sewing down. Slow. Why would you do that now? Because freedom don't mean much if a man holds it for you. She studied my face a long time. The fire popped once, the sound sharp. Then she said, "You let me walk away, if that's what you need." She stood, came close enough that I could smell the smoke and soap on her. Her voice was steady. "I already did, Caleb, the day I chose to stay." The words caught me still. She reached up, touched my face, just her fingertips along the old scar by my jaw. Her hand didn't tremble. "That scar looks like a river," she said. "Runs deep but still shining." I caught her hand, held it there, then I let it go. "You should sleep," I said. She smiled, knowing what I couldn't say. "Good night, Caleb." When the door closed behind her, I sat by the fire until the embers dimmed. My heart felt like that, warm still, but needing breath to burn again. The next morning, the world had turned gold. Sunlight came through the window and spilled across the table. Anna poured coffee, Luke chased the dog outside, and I watched it all, the simplest of scenes, yet it felt like grace. Later that day, I found her hanging sheets on the line, the wind filling them like sails. She looked at me over her shoulder, hair caught in the sun. "You keep staring like that," she said, "and folks will talk." "Let 'em," I said. "I'm too old to care." She laughed, shaking her head. "You're not old, Caleb Hart, just tired of waiting." She was right. Waiting for what, I wasn't sure. Maybe for a day that felt like this one. Light wind, clean air, laughter close by, and no ghost standing between us. When evening came, we walked down to the meadow again, Luke running ahead. Fireflies had begun to spark over the grass. Anna reached out, caught one on her palm, then opened her hand and watched it fly. "They don't stay long," she said. "They stay long enough," I said. She looked at me then, the glow fading between us, and smiled that quiet, certain smile that says the heart already knows where it belongs. Summer settled over the valley like a blessing, too gentle to name. The air grew thick with the hum of bees and the smell of cut hay. The mountains softened under heat haze, and the creek, full from the melt, moved slower, warmer. Days began early and stretched wide. Nights came in soft, with stars scattered thick enough to count by. Anna rose before dawn most mornings. I'd hear her moving about the kitchen, the sound of water poured, bread kneaded, the quiet creak of the floorboards. Luke would stumble in half awake, rubbing his eyes, asking for honey before breakfast. The house had a pulse then, steady, sure, alive in a way I hadn't felt since Clara's time. Sometimes I'd step outside, lean on the porch rail, and just listen. Birds waking in the cottonwoods, the creak of the barn as the sun warmed its boards. Her voice drifting through the door, low, half-sung. I didn't always know the tune, but it had the same weight as prayer. One afternoon, the sky broke open with thunder. We were in the field stacking hay when the first drops hit. Luke squealed and ran for the porch, but Anna stayed a moment longer, face lifted to the rain. Water streamed through her hair, darkening it to almost black. She laughed, that light sound that still startled me when it came, and said, "You coming or not, Caleb?" I dropped the pitchfork and followed. By the time we reached the porch, the rain was falling in sheets. Luke leaned out, palms open to catch it. She leaned against the post beside me, breathing deep. "Smells like the world's been washed clean," she said. "Maybe it has," I said. She turned her head toward me. Her eyes were darker in that light, softer too. "Sometimes," she said, "I forget what it felt like before this. Then the rain comes, and I remember what cold used to be." I looked at her, the drops on her face shining like glass. We stood there in the rain's roar, not touching, but near enough to feel the warmth off each other. Some things you don't rush, not if you want them to last. When the storm passed, the air was sweet and heavy. Steam rose from the fields. Luke ran barefoot through puddles, whooping like he'd caught the sky. Anna gathered the wet clothes and hung them on the line again. I fixed the latch on the barn door that the wind had torn loose. The ordinary rhythm of life, of the kind that saves you without you noticing. That evening, the three of us sat on the steps, the sun set long and gold. Luke leaned against my arm, half asleep. Anna had her sewing in her lap, but wasn't working it. The silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It was full, the way a heart feels full when it finally quits aching. When Luke went to bed, I stayed outside. The sky was deep blue now, stars pushing through. Anna came out, wiping her hands. She sat beside me, close but not touching. The smell of soap and lilac from her hair drifted on the night air. "He's growing fast," she said. "Boys do that when they feel safe," I said. She nodded. "You ever think about what comes next?" "Next for what?" "For us." The question hung there, simple and heavy as truth. I thought a long time before I answered. "I think about it every day," I said. "But I don't want to reach for it too fast. Some things you hold gentle till they know you won't break them." She smiled, a little sad, a little glad. "I'm not as fragile as I used to be. I know that. But I've learned how easy it is to hurt something by meaning well." The night grew quiet again. A coyote called somewhere down in the valley. She folded her hands, looked at me and said, "You're a careful man, Caleb Hart. Careful keeps folks alive out here. And lonely," she said. She wasn't wrong. The next week, we took the wagon to town for the harvest fair. Luke had been talking about it for days, asking if there'd be sweets, if there'd be music. Anna wore her best dress, the one she mended herself, pale blue with a white collar. Her hair was pinned up, but a few strands escaped. She looked like the kind of woman a man could build the rest of his life around. In town, folks nodded to us. Some smiled. A few still looked twice, but the whispers were gone. She walked steady beside me, Luke's hand in hers. The band played near the church, fiddles bright and fast. Luke danced with the other children, boots kicking dust. When a slower tune started, Anna looked at me. "You dance, Caleb?" "Not since my wedding." "Then it's past time," she said. She held out her hand, and I took it. We moved awkward at first, her laughter low, my steps stiff. Then something eased between us. The world around faded. Music, voices, everything but the feel of her hand in mine, the steady rise and fall of breath. Her head rested against my shoulder for a moment, and I knew that was what peace sounded like. After the song ended, we stepped away, but the space between us stayed changed. Luke came running, face sticky with pie, and she laughed, wiping his chin. That night, on the way home, the stars were thick above the trail. Luke fell asleep in the back of the wagon, curled in a blanket. Anna sat beside me, her hand resting near mine on the seat. Every turn of the wheels sounded like a heartbeat. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For giving us this." "I didn't give you anything," I said. "We just built what was missing." She looked over at me, eyes shining in the starlight. Maybe that's what giving really is. When we reached the cabin, I carried Luke inside. She followed, lit the lamp. The room glowed soft, the curtains stirring with the night wind. I set the boy in his bed and turned. She was standing near the table watching me, her hands folded. I took a breath. "Anna," I said. She waited. "This house was quiet a long time. You brought it back to life. I don't want you to ever think you owe it another day. But if you're willing, I'd like to keep building something with you." She didn't answer right away. Then she stepped closer, close enough that her voice came low. "You already are, Caleb." And she kissed me. Light. Sure, the way you seal something that's already been promised without words. When she stepped back, she smiled, a little shy, and said, "Good night." Then she turned, went to her room, and left me standing there, heart pounding like thunder after a long, dry spell. That was the night I knew the past had finally let go of both of us. After that night, everything between us shifted, but not in the way the world might think. There wasn't rush or fever in it. It was quieter, surer, like the land itself had decided to trust the warmth again. We went about our days as before, yet every glance, every word carried a different weight. Anna moved through the mornings with a calm I hadn't seen in anyone since before the war. She'd hum as she worked, sometimes the tune from that first winter, sometimes one I didn't know. Luke caught her rhythm, helping without being asked, his laughter weaving through her song. I'd stand at the door, coffee in hand, and feel that peace that comes only when a man realizes he's not alone anymore. One afternoon, I found her in the garden, hat shading her face, sweat darkening the back of her dress. I leaned on the fence and watched her dig, her hands sure, steady. She looked up, smiled. "You just gonna stand there and judge my rows?" "They're straight enough to shame a plow," I said. "Good," she said, "then get me that bucket." I handed it to her, and she poured water slow at each base, the soil drinking deep. When she straightened, she brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "You ever think about how we end up exactly where we're supposed to be?" she asked. "Sometimes," I said. "Mostly when I'm too tired to fight it." She smiled. "Maybe tired's the only way we learn to listen." That evening, Luke caught a trout in the creek, big as his arm. We cleaned it together, Anna laughing when the boy wrinkled his nose at the smell. Supper that night was fish crisp from the pan, fresh bread, and the sound of the creek outside our window. Afterward, she sat on the porch, mending a tear in Luke's coat while I sharpened a blade. I remember thinking how still the air was, the kind of still that comes right before dusk lays its hand across everything and tells it to rest. She said, "Caleb, do you ever miss who you were before?" I shook my head. "That man's gone, buried under snow and bad choices. I don't believe people disappear like that," she said. "I think they just go quiet until someone listens close enough. Maybe. But sometimes quiet's mercy." She looked at me, eyes soft. "You talk like a preacher, but you move like a man who's still fighting ghosts." She wasn't wrong. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went outside, the moon full, the meadow washed silver. The fence line stretched out like a hymn written in wood and shadow. I walked its length, hand brushing the rails. Somewhere behind me the door creaked. "Couldn't sleep either," she said, her voice soft as the night itself. She came to stand beside me, shawl wrapped around her shoulders. The wind caught a lock of her hair, and she tucked it behind her ear. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked. "No, I already did my leaving," she nodded. "I did too, but I think I finally came home." She turned her face to the moonlight. For a long time we didn't speak. Then she said, "Sometimes I wonder what God was doing the day we met. I reckon he was tired of watching two lonely souls waste good daylight," I said. She laughed quietly, the sound mingling with the wind. When she looked up again, her eyes caught the moonlight. I felt that same stillness as the day I first saw her. Only this time, it didn't freeze me. It steadied me. "You never did ask me what I want," she said. "What do you want, Nana?" "To belong without owing. To stay because it's home, not because it's safe." "Then stay," I said. She took a breath, long and slow, then stepped closer. Her hand brushed mine, fingers cold from the night. "When I first came here," she said, "I thought love was something you had to earn. Now I know it's something you build. One word, one look, one quiet morning at a time." I couldn't answer. Words felt too small for what I carried just then. Instead, I reached up, cupped her face. Her skin was cool, smooth beneath my thumb. "You don't have to say anything," she whispered. "Just don't run." "I won't," I said. "Not ever again." She leaned into my hand, eyes closing. The wind moved through the grass, whispering low. We stood there until the cold began to bite, then went inside. Luke stirred in his sleep, muttered something about the horse, and rolled over. Anna covered him with the quilt and turned to me. "You look at him the way some men look at land they'll never sell," she said. "He's all that's left of what I did right." "Maybe not all," she said. She brushed past me, the scent of lilac from her hair trailing after her. At the door to her room, she stopped. "Caleb," she said. "Yeah. You think the past ever stops following? Only when you walk faster than it does." She nodded, smiled that small, knowing smile, and closed the door. The next morning, the light came soft and gold, washing the room clean. Luke ran out shouting that the first calf had been born. Anna followed, tying her hair up as she went. I stood in the doorway, watching them run across the yard, and felt something inside me finally go quiet. Not the silence of emptiness, but the kind that comes when every piece finds its place. By afternoon, the sun burned hot. I fixed the fence by the south pasture while Anna brought lemonade from the porch. She handed me the cup, our fingers brushing again. The touch lingered. "You keep doing that," I said, "and the fence'll never get finished." "Maybe that's the plan," she said. She turned, walking back toward the house, her laughter carried by the wind. And I knew, clear as I ever knew anything, that this place, this woman, this boy, was the life I've been meant to build all along. Autumn came quiet, slow, and sure. The hills turned gold, then rust, then the color of ash. The mornings carried the scent of frost, sharp enough to wake you clean. The harvest was good, better than I'd hoped. The shelves were lined with jars, the hay stacked high. Life had steadied into something that felt whole. Anna took to baking more when the air cooled. The smell of bread drifted out to the yard, mixing with wood smoke. Luke split kindling after his lessons, proud to be trusted with the hatchet. I'd watch him from the barn door, his small frame bent in concentration, and think about how much time we'd stolen back from loss. One afternoon, I found her sitting on the porch steps, a shawl over her shoulders, a letter in her lap. Her eyes were far off, not sad exactly, but somewhere else. "Bad news?" I asked. "No, just the past, catching up slow." A friend from back east wrote, said the man who sold me off is dead. I nodded, waited. "Feels strange," she said. "I thought I'd feel free." but all I feel is tired. Freedom's quiet, I said. Sometimes it sounds like nothing at all. She looked at me then, her eyes clear in the gray light. You ever think about getting married again? I thought about the question a long moment, then said, every day since I met you. She didn't smile, just folded the letter and set it aside. Then she said, I'm not the kind of woman men build dreams around, Caleb. Maybe not dreams, I said, but the kind they wake up for. She drew in a slow breath, her hand brushing mine. The air between us felt like that first spring thaw, soft, trembling, alive with what could be. That night, after Luke was asleep, we sat by the fire. The flames were low, the wood crackling soft. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a ring I'd found weeks before, a simple band of silver, nothing fancy, just honest metal. I'm not good with speeches, I said. You don't need one, she said. Still, I tried. You gave me back my home, Anna, my boy, my peace, my faith. I want to spend what's left of my days making sure you never doubt you belong here. She stared at the ring, then at me. The firelight caught the wet in her eyes. Say it plain, Caleb, she whispered, marry me. She reached out, took the ring, turned it between her fingers. Then she said, you sure? I'm sure enough to stake the rest of my days on it. She smiled then, tears slipping free, and held out her hand. I slid the ring onto her finger. It fit like it had been waiting. When she leaned in, her forehead touched mine. We sat like that, quiet, the fire painting us in gold. The wedding was small, just us, Luke, and the preacher from town who came up on horseback. The air was crisp, the leaves bright underfoot. Anna wore her blue dress, the one she'd sewn curtains from. Luke stood beside me, straight-backed, proud. When the preacher said the words, her eyes never left mine. She said I do, like it was a promise she'd already kept. Afterward, Luke threw handfuls of petals he'd gathered, shouting, they're married. They're really married. His voice carried up the slope and echoed back down. We had stew and bread for supper, laughter warm around the table. Anna braided Luke's hair from his eyes, and he said, Ma, you look pretty. She kissed his head, whispered, you look brave. That night the stars came out thick. The three of us stood outside, breath turning to smoke. The world was wide and silent, the kind of silence that holds more than words ever could. I looked at her hand in mine, the ring glinting faint in starlight. You happy? I asked. Happier than I thought the world would allow, she said. She looked up at the sky, then back at me. Thank you, Caleb, for not turning away. I shook my head. You thank me every time you stay. She smiled, leaned against my shoulder. Luke yawned, curled between us, his small hands gripping our coats. We stayed like that a long time, watching the stars climb. The wind moved through the grass, whispering against the hills. The cabin windows glowed behind us, steady and warm. I thought of that day in Helena, the sack, the laughter, the cold. I thought of the road, the snow, the silence that had once felt endless. And I thought of this moment, the quiet, full of life, the weight of her hand, the sound of the boy's breath. People talk about redemption like it's lightning. Quick, blinding, all at once. But it isn't. It's slower than that. It's every morning you wake and choose kindness again. Every small mercy you offer. Every scar you stop hiding. Anna taught me that. And when the wind blew through the valley that night, carrying the smell of smoke and wild sage, I knew we'd built something the world couldn't take apart. A home, a family, a peace that finally held. That's the truth of it. The bride no one wanted. The man too tired to hope. The boy who just wanted someone to stay. Together we found what the frontier keeps for those who don't quit looking. Not gold, not glory, just love that endures. And that's enough.